Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of the Niche Cage Variety Show. We are here from the niche-cage.com, home of Aotearoa sporting yarn and kōrero. We've just finished a pretty fun chat about Blackcaps in Pakistan, Wellington Phoenix, and a bit of Warriors. We always like to integrate the Warriors and the Phoenix, even the Breakers, into a bit of a kōrero, just assessing how those teams are situated, specifically junior development. And like with the Wellington Phoenix, we dove deep into replacing Ben Waine. And we talked about this at length in the Patreon podcast. But I do want to throw this idea out there, Wildcard. I think it's one of the most undercover Kiwi sports stories happening right now, is that the Wellington Phoenix effectively sold one of their best local players, Ben Waine. He goes overseas. The Wellington Phoenix, they get some cash from the transfer fee. And it's probably not going to impact the Wellington Phoenix at all. It's not going to be detrimental to their season. There's no dramas about losing Ben Waine. They're just going to keep trucking. They've already kept trucking. Ben Waine's obviously enjoying his time in the Flying Kiwis, as you're going to highlight in the variety show. I think it's a big respect to what the Wellington Phoenix are doing, that they can bid ka kite to Ben Waine and keep on trucking. And also, imagine if any other Kiwi sporting franchise, i.e. the Warriors, lost one of their best young local talents mid-season. Everyone would have their knickers in a twist. But when you go to football and Ben Waine and the Wellington Phoenix, it's all honkadory.
Yeah, there's an interesting quote I noticed from his new coach, a fellow by the name of Stephen Schumacher, who coincidentally, godfather to David Ball's kid. He's the godfather of David Ball's son. They were teammates at Fleetwood Town together. So one of the many reasons in which this Ben Waine to Plymouth Argyle transfer was kind of, written in the stars or, fatefully designed. But there was a quote from Schumacher where they said, like, just it was kind of an offhand thing while he's been asked about something else, and he's like, because he was talking, what he was talking about was Ben Waine's match fitness, having done a big overhaul flight to get to Plymouth, and whether he'll be ready for the first game. As it happened, he wasn't registered in time for that game, but he did debut the one after that. So this is the game I'm talking about. And they said, like, he said, well, he's a little bit short on match fitness at the moment because he was only on the bench for the last couple of games for the Wellington Phoenix, and I think their coach probably knew the transfer was coming and was starting to maybe think about his plans moving forward or something like that. Like, he hinted the reason Ben Waine wasn't starting those games was because he was leaving, and whereas I don't think that's true. I just think he wasn't going to be starting those games. I think Oscar Savada has started every game except one this season. They wanted him starting, and they probably wanted someone else more like a David Ball, rather than having two target men type focal point strikers. Like, you want someone to work off of the guy. I just don't think Ben Waine was considered first choice at that point, which says they've sold a bench option for a profit who they developed in the academy. That's just another way. That's why they're not losing out from. They obviously are going to miss his impact if it's 2-1 down, 20 minutes to go, someone's tired. We want to make an impact sub. They don't have someone like Ben Waine at the moment to do that. But maybe that's just Costa Barbarousas' job or Jan Saas's job or something else instead. But they've the reason they've been able to absorb his loss is because that's a stacked attacking lineup. And it's a well-constructed squad. And he probably wasn't considered a first-choice starter anyway for them. So that's outrageously good business, isn't it, when you can do that kind of thing? For a player you developed yourself, especially.
Pick up the Patreon whānau supporting all the Niche Cage content. There is that podcast there every week. Join the Patreon whānau, patreon.com/our Niche Cage, our Niche Cage, and you can also sign up to a Substack subscription and all the Patreon podcasts Also sent out via Substack for those paid subscribers. So those are the best way to support the Niche Case directly. Patreon's the best way overall, and then there's always an extra podcast, so you can support the Niche Case content directly straight up the guts, and we also deliver an extra podcast for our supporters as well. Sign up to the Substack. We send out a email newsletter every Monday and Friday. Those are free. Those are all good. Those feature plenty of Aotearoa sporting information. Right now, the Monday email newsletter we sent out yesterday was a lot of cricket and a lot of football. And that's just how we flow. Like, it's that time of year where it's cricket and, strangely, football. Like, this is peak football time, so it is a bit weird, but we just roll with the Aotearoa sporting flow. We flow down that Aotearoa sporting awa, the river, and we just touch on what we want to touch on, speak on what we want to speak on. And every Monday and Friday, we send out our email newsletter with all sorts of Aotearoa sporting information. Sign up via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. And obviously, you are here listening to our podcast, Korero. So we're always delivering podcasts as well. You can subscribe on the YouTube. You can subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, however you want it. It's always there twice a week, unless Papatūānuku and Ranganui say otherwise, but they rarely do, because
they almost did today.
they did, definitely. They almost did today, but we were guided by Matariki, so it's all good. No wakan furries there. Obviously, big up the Niche Case, theniche-case.com. I feel like we've already just had a mindful experience, but we need another one. Mindfulness Chief, what do you got?
Yeah, from Mindfulness Chief William Faulkner, the American novelist from the 20th century. A quote from one of his books, which goes that clocks slay time. Time is dead as long as it is being clicked off by little wheels. Only when the clock stops does time come to life.
I don't know what's happening there. Only when the clock stops does time come to life. That seems like something I need to sit with for a couple of days. I can't drop a freestyle response off the top of the dome for that one.
Well, I'll tell you what I took from that, which is the idea that when you're because the clock basically, like, what's a clock's job is to measure time, right? It's like a measurement. It's telling you what the time is now based in relation to whatever the ideas that we've come up with as a society to tell time, the hours and the minutes and things. I'm sure others, I don't know if other societies have, because I know it's also like, a month is based on a moon cycle, a week is based on fractions within that and whatnot. So maybe that's a universal thing. I'm actually not sure. But I think maybe the idea of like constantly quantifying is not the most freeing thing in the world, Whereas it's those times where you stop worrying about the clock and how much time do I have to do this, breaking everything up into little blocks. That might be the most effective way to work sometimes, but it's not the most freeing experience. Whereas those times where you just completely lose track of time and time starts to feel not so rigid, not so like 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, but this elastic thing where sometimes it's moving faster and sometimes it's moving slower, are often the times, I shouldn't use the word times, but are often the, I don't know, the moments where you have the most room for experience, if you sort of follow my drift there. Like, the most memorable things you get up to in your life are probably the times when time itself is irrelevant.
Correct. I agree. Well put. Let's get into some Aotearoa sport here. I'm going to take the lead. I'm going to get this started. And I want to update folks, and I want to update my own brain, because last week in this segment, I was pondering, what did all that Blackcaps test stuff in Pakistan mean? Like, I don't know what we're going to take from it, take with us into the Kiwi summer. It was fun. I don't know what it was. It was there. It was good. They didn't win, so it was good, but they didn't win. Now we've got an ODI series win. against Pakistan, in Pakistan, and I'm actually really intrigued about the Blackcaps pivot. It seems like a bit of a cargo ship pivot. Very slow moving pivot. It's not a sharp turn in a different direction. This is something that's been brewing for a long time, and we think back like 2, 3, 4 months to some of the contract stuff and Trent Bolt and the T20 leagues and all that stuff, and that was kind of very drastic change on the surface. But now we're seeing the Blackcaps pivot to a funky new era. We've got the ODI World Cup being played in India later this year, so some of the ODI stuff we saw in Pakistan applies here, where you've got kind of 4 decent ODI spin bowlers, 2 of which are going to be decent batters as well. You've got Ishodi, Mitchell Santner, Glenn Phillips, Michael Bracewell, and the spinning all-rounders Bracewell and Phillips are just fun cricketers. You've got really good batters, Devon Conway, Kane Williamson, Tom Latham, and you got some other funk there with the likes of Finn Allen, Daryl Mitchell. Tommy Blundell loves a bit of run scoring, but he's not going to be in the white ball mix. But Blackcaps are moving in a different direction. Obviously, the captaincy as well, Tim Southee taken over from Kane Williamson. Like, it's all quite fresh and it's all quite different. And I think that is very exciting considering how stale things were, especially after that ODI series in Australia. We come off of like a difficult test winter. Then you got smoked by Australia in an ODI series, and it was just a bit stale. It was just like, ugh. Now they're reinvigorated, I think. And there's a pivot with a different style of team, different style of selections, and I'm curious how this looks forward into the Kiwi summer. I don't care at all about the cricket in India coming up, even though the ODI World Cup is going to be in India, but I'm just kind of burnt out by Blackcaps cricket. But I'm definitely intrigued by this pivot that we've seen from the Blackcaps in Pakistan, given the bigger picture, given the context around this team. What's your leading take, Wildcard?
A leading take is that, in light of some of the stuff we were talking about at the start of the podcast, Ben Waine's transfer to Plymouth Argyle. I'm telling people that Ben Waine is going to be just fine at Plymouth Argyle. Made his debut at the first opportunity after his rego went through. This was the league game against Bolton. Nearly scored a late winner that was cleared off the line. Then started an EFL Trophy quarter final, which was this against Bristol Rovers, and it was the EFL Trophy is like also known as the Papa John's Trophy, is like a cup competition for League One downwards. So none of the Championship teams, none of the Premier League teams or anything like that. He started that quarterfinal along with a bunch of their other new signings. I think there were about four of their January signings started that game. Ben Waine scores a beautifully taken headed goal, his first for the club. Should have probably had a hat-trick after missing a couple other big chances as well. Plymouth go on to win 2-0. Ben Waine goes on to be the man of the match. Then had a pretty strong impact on the weekend as well off the bench as the Pilgrims rallied from a goal down to equalise in stoppage time to draw 1-1 with Ipswich, which was, not the ideal result, but a pretty important point saved in the context against a fellow promotion candidate. Waine didn't score, but he did bring some energy off the bench, which went down pretty well with the fans. He's already shown off that Wellington Phoenix work rate. He's got great mobility. He's got deceptive strength. He's enthusiastic. He's already got the fans on his side. Like, these are all things that bode extremely well for settling into a new level of football at a new club and in a new environment. And the thing that has always stood out for Waine at the Phoenix, like the number one thing I would say to describe Ben Waine as a player, which I think is probably the thing that's going to translate, the thing that ensures that he should translate his game from there to the new, from Wellington to Plymouth, as much as anything, is that he's just an excellent finisher. So Ben Waine scored 17 A-League goals for the Phoenix. He did that with just 75 total shots. That's a 23% conversion rate. Basically, 1 in every 4 shots he took, he scored a goal. That rises to 49% from shots on target. So pretty much every second shot on target was a goal for the Waine train. over the 3 seasons where he was a regular first team player for the Knicks, he was consistently one of the best finishers in terms of that conversion rate and across the entire league. It's a dude who scored goals at under 20 level. It was his goals that got him into the under 20 World Cup a couple of years ago, where he was the youngest player in the squad. He scored at National League level. He's scored in the A-League. He's scored heaps of FFA Cup goals as well. He's scored on All-White's debut. He did that, came off the bench and scored the winner in an Oceania game. He's already scored for Plymouth. This is basically what he does. So as much as there'll be an adjustment required in League One, Waine does have the skills required to make that adjustment, to make that work. And his hot start so far, earning a lot of brownie points off the bat, means he should continue to get opportunities to do so. So, I mean, I think if you look just from a generalized Flying Kiwis perspective, a lot of the reasons when players don't crack it overseas is that they just don't quite find the right fit. Like they've got the wrong manager playing the wrong style or whatever. Clayton Lewis, I'm sure, Ben Waine's old Phoenix teammate, could probably tell him a fair few tales about his Scunthorpe days, where I think that was definitely a factor for Lewis, was that wasn't on the right team at the right time. But Ben Waine already seems to fit nicely with Argyle. He might already be pushing for a regular starting spot based on these first 3 appearances. So yeah, there's nothing to worry about with the Waine train. He is going to do just fine at Plymouth Argyle.
Let's get statistical. And I have done a deep dive into the Canterbury women cricket team competing in the Super Smash and the Halliburton Johnston Shield. And my stat this week is that Canterbury have 3 bowlers in the top 5 Super Smash bowler rankings. Gabby Sullivan and Missy Banks are both tied on 10 wickets. And then you've got Amy Satterthwaite. She's got 9 wickets. So they've got 3 bowlers in the top 5 bowlers for Women's Super Smash. Canterbury also have 2 batters in the top 5 for Super Smash runs. Amy Satterthwaite, she's 2nd for Super Smash runs. And Kate Anderson is 5th for Super Smash runs. Canterbury's got 3 of the top 5 bowlers, 2 of the top 5 batters. None of them are in the White Ferns, which means they're going to be playing the rest of the Super Smash, which means Canterbury's going to be really good. What's your stat?
My stat is, well, it's 2023 now. It's a new year. It's time to get the old Steve-O stats trend back underway. So last season, Steven Adams won the Triple Crown for offensive rebounding in the NBA. I don't know if anyone's ever done that before. I haven't. It actually might be something to check through, actually, and see if anyone has ever led the league in total offensive rebounds per game, offensive rebounds, and offensive rebounding percentage in the same season before. I suspect someone has. I mean, normally when there's a stat like this and it's like, has anyone ever done this before? You'll check and it'll be like, yeah, Wilt Chamberlain did it 6 seasons in a row by doubling whatever the current guy's doing. It's normally how it goes. But yeah, Steven Adams last season, 349 total offensive rebounds, which was more than 50 ahead of Mitch Robinson in second. He had 4.6 per game, well clear of Robbo's 4.1 per game. And of all players with at least 1,500 minutes played last season, his 17.9% offensive rebounding percentage also led the way by a healthy margin. That's not a new stat. That's an old stat. I say that, though, so I can say this. He's even better this season. So he was comfortably the best offensive rebounder last season. This season, halfway through it, no small margins, he's increased every single one of those things. And pretty significantly, that 17.9 rebounding percentage has risen to 19.5 offensive rebounding percentage. 4.6 per game, that's up to 4.9 per game. 188 total, roughly the halfway stage. Is well on track to beat that 349 tally, and pretty comfortably as well. So the best in the business has gotten better. And not only that, his defensive rebounding has also taken a big leap this season. So he is actually averaging a career high 6.4 of those cherries per game as well, along with that 4.9 offensive boards, which has frankly up there with the best rebounders full stop in the NBA. Only Domantas Sabonis, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Rudy Gobert, all international players, including Steven Adams as well. Interesting. Americans can't rebound. They're the only guys averaging more total rebounds per game than Steven Adams this season, and all of them play at least 5 minutes more per game than he does. So that's for the full season as well. Like Adams he's on the rise. That's the other thing. He might well catch some of those dudes because since Christmas Day, he has averaged 14.7 total boards per game. Not a soul in the NBA can top that over the same span of time. And this is despite only averaging 28 minutes per night. That includes career high 23 total boards against Sacramento. That includes also setting a new personal best with 13 offensive boards in that very same game. He had 21 the game before against the Pelicans, which made him the first ever Grizzlies player to get 20 plus rebounds in consecutive games. Steve-O's stats off to a great start in 2023. He's not just the best offensive rebounder in the NBA. He might be the best rebounder full stop in the NBA.
That's what he does. Deep in my mangroves, we've got a Hockey World Cup, and we've got the Black Sticks men battling along. They had a first up win over Chile. It was a 3-1 victory, and then last night they were smoked by Netherlands 4-0, which was kind of to be expected, but it's also not the worst result considering that the Kiwis will face Malaysia in their next game, which is Thursday night, I believe. Obviously, Netherlands, they will face Chile, and the Kiwis should be able to defeat Malaysia, which would put them second in Pool C. Top 3 teams from each pool qualifies for the next stage. So 3 out of the 4 teams qualify for the next stage. And if the Kiwis can finish second, it should give them an easier follow-up game as opposed to finishing third. I would expect them to defeat Malaysia. I expected them to defeat Chile, and they were pretty decent in that game against Chile. They were able to get into their passing patterns. They were able to execute what they wanted to do, especially in the first half. I think there was a bit of a drop-off in the second half, Chile adjusting to World Cup hockey. But also, I think the Kiwis they got the job done, which was most important. Netherlands is always going to be a tricky battle for the Kiwis. And yeah, just chalking that up. In the NBA, they call it a schedule loss. And I think that was a schedule loss against the Netherlands. That's all good. Obviously, we want to see them defeat teams like the Netherlands. I just don't think it's realistic at this stage. And now they'll play Malaysia. Again, should be victorious. You've got, we discussed this, it might have been on the Niche Cast, where you got Simon Child playing in the attacking line, similar to Messi with Argentina. Similar to Messi on a bunch of different levels, like just his standing.
Except for stature.
Yeah, except for physical stature, size, but yeah. In a variety of different ways, most notably how they operate, like dropping back to receive the ball from a striker position and do a lot of playmaking. I like how the Black Sticks have got some workers around Simon Child up top. But someone like Sam Lane is very good finisher as well. Sam Hiha scored a couple of goals against Chile, which was good to see as well. In defense, you got the regulars like Blair Tarrant, Kane Russell, Nick Woods are the fulcrums back there. I think we're seeing a bit of Nick Ross pushing upfield as well, which is good because he's a very creative ball carrier and he's very good at holding the ball and putting others into space, which when combined with Nick Woods is complementary skill sets. And also, I like the Morrison brothers. I think you've got Joe in more of an attacking midfielder position and Charlie Morrison. He is a defender, and you've got Simon Yorston also in a defender. Those dudes look pretty decent at the international level for young hockey players. And I don't know, the biggest theme for me in Kiwi sport is Canterbury excellence. There's a lot of fantastic athletes across a wide range of sports coming out of Canterbury. And all those young dudes, the Morrison brothers and Simon Yorston, Sam Lane, let alone anyone else I forgot, they're all from Canterbury. Canterbury's got the best seam bowlers in Aotearoa cricket. I just did a deep dive into Canterbury women. Who's the footballer you mentioned from Canterbury, maybe in the Patreon podcast? Not Kalotti, the other guy?
Kyan Donkers.
He's from Canterbury football as well.
Yeah, under 19 striker, probably will go to the under 20 World Cup this year. Scored a few goals for Kashmir Tech in the National League.
And we've got football ferns. Mackenzie Berry is a Cantab, let
No,
alone
Mackenzie
others.
Berry's from New Plymouth. Kate Taylor, the other centre back,
Right,
is a
there you go.
Cantab,
So,
along with a few others. Marissa Vandermeer. There's a
and
couple of them
with
in that team.
Canterbury's also had a decent presence in your National League stuff as well. Basketball, Canterbury's fantastic at basketball in both men's and women's. So I started with a Black Sticks deep in the mangroves, and I think I finished with a Canterbury deep in the mangroves. So shout out to the mangroves in the wider Canterbury region. I sees ya. I want to go kayaking in those mangroves, and I definitely want to bust the jandal in those mangroves as well. Deep in your mangroves. What do you got?
Rightio, yeah. So last week I did a Flying Kiwis transfer roundup slash transfer window preview type thing for the Mangroves. This week I want to show a bit of loving towards the players who aren't going anywhere, because even with a couple big January transfers going down, at least one's already happened with Ben Waine. There's at least one more. I expect Marko Stamenic is highly likely to get one before the end of the month. There's always a potential for a few more unexpected ones. Despite all that, I think the theme of the rest of the European season for the Flying Kiwis is it's a lot more about the comeback kings and queens. So laying this down, you got Ryan Thomas in the last week and a half. He's played his first few games for Pick Swallow, returning to them after being released from PSV. He was 461 days between professional games. He was out injured for a year and a third, roughly. Or a year and a quarter. That's a long time to be missing for a guy who's already had extended injury breaks before in his career. Absolutely beautiful to see him back for Zwolle. Even started a couple of those games, although he did go off. Apparently, they suspect he might have dislocated his elbow in the most recent one, so went off injured there, which definitely when I saw him going off, saw that he'd gone off injured, bit of a panic. At least it's not his knee, though. I think an elbow thing is a bit more, and hopefully it's not nothing serious. He won't have to miss any games because it's been far too long without his silky passing skills on display. So beautiful back, and hopefully big season as Pick Swallow push for promotion. You've also got, likewise, 2022, absolute bastard of a year for Sarpreet Singh. He was in amazing form at the start of the year, on loan for Jan Regensburg, second tier of German football. Threatened to lead the entire league for assists. He was looking brilliant. And then comes the pelvis injury, which ruled him out for the rest of that season. Then it ruled him out for the All Whites game as well. And I kind of think if Sarpreet Singh had played against Costa Rica, the All Whites might have made the World Cup. Then it also spoiled his medical. And many failed medical when he was for his proposed switch to Werder Bremen, which would have kept him in the Bundesliga. So, yeah, tough year for him already at that point. Then he goes on loan back to Jan Regensburg to kind of like do a re-up sort of thing. And it gets even worse because they screw up his registration and means you can't play until the January transfer window instead of being able to play sort of around October-y thing. So he misses a couple more months on top of already the 8 months or so he had been missing already to that point. He's back next week. Next week's first game after the winter break. He should be fit and raring to go, and probably playing with an absolute vengeance against the gods of football. So can't wait to see Sarpreet Singh back in action. Rebecca Stott's another one. Returned to Brighton. She signed there a couple years ago, then left, played half a season, but then left because she got a cancer diagnosis, comes back to Australia, recovers from that, complete remission. Beautiful story. Has played a season in the A-League since then, has played a few games for the Football Ferns since then, has re-signed with Brighton, gone back over there, then needed ankle surgery in preseason and missed the first half of the season. But she is back in contention. She was on the bench in their most recent game, ready to go for a team that pretty desperately needs some defensive help. Brighton, they've very much been struggling in that category. Still got to wait a bit longer for Rhea Percival at Spurs, though, coming back from her ACL that she suffered in April, probably a couple more months before. But hopefully she does come back before the end of the WSL season, and surely before the start of the World Cup. Joe Bell is a sneaky one who really has fallen out of favor at Brøndby, but they've sacked their coach over the winter break, and they've brought a new coach in. And when a new coach comes in, fresh slate for everyone. Hopefully that means Joe Bell's back in the mix there. And then also Libby Kakache. I'm starting to suspect that because he's been the backup left back for Empoli in Serie A. He's played a couple of games, but only a couple. The guy who he was swapping time with last year, Fabiano Parisi, has had such a breakout season that he's even been selected for the Italy squad one time. He's going to leave Empoli. Parisi is not going to stay at Empoli. And when he leaves, Kakache is the next left back. So hopefully that means a bunch of games for him. Just a matter of whether Parisi leaves now or in the summer. And I suspect it's more likely to be in 6 months' time. But hopefully not. He's still got a couple of weeks for someone. But Empoli are trying to drive up a bidding war between all the other Italian clubs and maybe a few overseas ones. But so Kakache's a little bit of an asterisk there on the comeback wagon. I'm hopeful for all the others, but Kakache might have to wait till next season, but hopefully not. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, comeback kings and queens for Flying Kiwis is definitely the theme for the start of 2023.
Question time. My question for you is measuring Football Ferns' positive results against the US women's national team, probably, well, definitely the best women's football team in the world. What is a positive result from this 2-game series against the US team?
Well, last time they played them, they lost 5-0 with their full strength team. So if they can do better than that with a weakened team, I'd be pretty happy. That phrase you used earlier about a scheduled loss, that definitely applies here. They're not going to. It would be an absolutely stunning upset if a backup Ferns team were able to get anything off America. Although I will say America, they don't have the same dramas with player availability because all their players are in their American League off season. They do have a striker at PSG who couldn't be selected because they're playing, but they do have a few injuries as well. Like there's a few players that are out that would normally be there, so they're not at full strength, but they're probably about 80%, and we're at like 50%. So less than 5-0 would be good. I think maybe a better thing to look at is just accept they're probably going to get thrashed in both these games, but can they get a goal or two? Because that would be a huge boost if they could hit the back of the net against America, get a bit of confidence that way, especially with a lot of young and unproven forwards who, for a team that's not scoring a lot, nobody's safe in those areas. Liv Chance is probably the only one, and she is still playing these games, so maybe she'll be the orchestrator. But, there's spots up for grabs. If you can score a couple goals against America, you might find yourself starting in week 1 of the thing, even though you might only be a fringe squad player at this point. Like there's a lot up for grabs there. And yeah, we'll see. Hopefully they can at least get some shots against a good American team. My question back the other way is, because I've been watching a little bit of this under 17s Oceania men's stuff and the football, and that level I'm watching players who I've never seen before. So it's like my first indication of what these players are like. And I know you follow a fair bit of the pre-NRL grade rugby league stuff quite closely. And there's an under 19s Women's Cricket World Cup going on at the moment. I'm just curious how, like, when you're watching prospect players, when you're evaluating prospects, what are the things that you're looking for in terms of assessing young talent?
I do not evaluate prospects or young players.
Interesting answer.
That's my answer. I following it, so I'm following the under 19 World Cup right now. The Warriors SG ball team will start up again soon, and there are these pockets of junior sport which I do find interesting, but that is more just to build up a knowledge of what is happening. Who are the players? Yeah. Where are they from? How are they perceived? Like, I've got a pretty high opinion of Izzy Sharp, a young Canterbury batter, and she captained the New Zealand under 19 in their first game against Indonesia. So you just start to stack those points on top of each other that either confirm or disagree with your perception and your belief of the player. But I don't know, for me personally, a lot of juniors can beat up other juniors. So a lot of junior cricketers can score runs and take wickets against other juniors. Rugby and rugby league, you're dealing with, the biggest dude is probably going to be the best dude and stuff like that. So I don't evaluate the prospects in that way until they play against adults. Because if that big bopper can't run it straight against an adult, there's no point in him pursuing rugby league. And again, like, you got to respect and be empathetic to these youngsters. They might not want to play professional sports, and there's all sorts of variety of reasons. Who's to say professional sport is a higher level of living than not being a professional athlete? Like, it doesn't define you as a person either way. So I try to steer away from assessing juniors in that way, but also, what are you doing against adults? Because that's where you're going to be playing your sport. And so all these under 19 cricketers that are away with the New Zealand under 19 T20 World Cup team, I'm more interested in what they do in domestic cricket. Because if you're an 18-year-old scoring runs against adults, you're impressive. If you're an 18, 19-year-old and you're impressing for the Warriors New South Wales Cup team, that's a different gravy to dominating SG ball. Similar with, like, you get some of that Wellington Phoenix, if they're performing in the Phoenix B team that competes in an adult national league, that's how you measure the talent. But I definitely try to steer clear of evaluating talent in that way until they're placed in, because by that time as well, you're kind of sorting out who are the people who actually want to pursue a professional career.
Yeah.
And you kind of weed out that you sort through the different players in that way, instead of like, yeah, this kid is a 5-star 17-year-old, and 2 years later he's nowhere because he just chose to do something else. Like, just doesn't seem the most logical way of assessing talent, especially when we cover the adult leagues and the big donnies of these sports, and that is where our attention is. Musical jam. It's finished with a bit of musical jam. Just got some funky Aotearoa music. I've got a couple of bands that I've never heard about before. We got Parallel Park. They got a new EP, the Parallel Park Volume 1 EP. Check that out. Just some lovely old guitar, chill New Zealand music. And you've got the Moonlander Sunriser EP. So the band is Moonlander, and they've got a Sunriser EP out as well. So it's just some mellow Kiwi music for your summer soundtrack, your musical jam.
Yeah, I heard that Moonlander one. It was in our weekly tunes article, and which you had chucked in there, and I hadn't heard of them either. And I played it to figure out which the reason I played it is because I clicked through to it, played automatically because I clicked through to the YouTube page of it, so I could find out which one was the title and which one was the song name, so I could know which one to put in the thing. And I quite liked it too. That was a cool tune. Other than that, there's not a lot going on at the start of the year. There's an Iggy Pop album that I mentioned late last year that I want to listen to that I haven't quite got to, but I shall. I think Margot Price had a sort of album of outtake things coming out that I had noticed. John Cale's got an album coming out. It's not a lot else, but yeah, there's start of the year. That's normal areas.
Big up yourself. That is the Niche Cage Variety Show. We'll be back on Thursday with another episode of the Niche Cars. Check out the website, theniche-cage.com. Lots of Aotearoa sporting yarn to be found there. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Cheer, cheer.